of July stones and bricks, deep in thought. Though ailing and exhausted, he is restless, his agile mind caught up in a complex pattern of problems. Only a few hours left before Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania joins the other representatives of the 13 colonies in the Second Continental Congress to press for a decision that will shake the British Empire. Will the resolution for freedom be passed? Will the Declaration of Independence be signed? As he trudges the quiet streets he's known for half a century, Ben Franklin reflects on the long months of talking, negotiating, and delay. Think of it. An entire year since Bunker Hill was bathed in colonial blood. General Washington, desperately short of troops and supplies at this very moment, pitted against superior British forces fighting an undeclared war on American soil. England remains deaf to the demands for justice. But at the State House, the debate goes on and on. Voices raised in anger, passion, and despair, moving slowly toward agreement. The resolution that these should be free and independent states has strong backing, but a few conservative colonies plead caution. Some timid men talk of treason, trade, and cultural ties with England, a last-ditch plea to mend the unmendable breach. Some of the Southern delegates, although strong for independence, refuse to agree until the anti-slavery denunciation is removed from the Declaration. His own colony, Pennsylvania, and Delaware both split down the middle. The uninstructed New York delegation sits on the fence, politely. How long can this go on? Has the Declaration come too soon? Are we ready to pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor? For almost 20 years before, as a colonial agent in England, Franklin had pleaded for mutual patience and understanding. But now, in 1776, this printer and patriot, statesman and scientist, scholar and sage, knows that the time for waiting is past. He must help lead the majority in demanding that the break with England be made now. So now Ben sits musing in his regular chair at the Pennsylvania delegation table. Shortly, he will argue once again that a Declaration of Independence is essential if the war is to be won. For the colonies must not simply be considered rebels by European nations whose assistance could mean the difference between victory and defeat. That's why for all these weeks, Franklin has been pleading the cause quietly, intently, persuasively, the voice of reason, compromising, bringing men together. Yes, Dr. Franklin, remember all those years of urging people to work together for the militia, the assembly, the postal system, the first hospital. In this last quiet hour before you must press for the crucial decision, perhaps you sit here alone, thinking, retracing the long road, recalling how it all began many, many years ago. Born in the shadow of Old South Church on Milk Street in Boston in January 1706, he is the youngest son in a noisy, affectionate family of 17. After only 2 years of formal education, he must leave school to help his father, a soap and candle maker. Ben detests his greasy job. Intensely curious, he dreams of going to sea and develops an early passion for reading books. He's sturdy and active, swimming like a fish in Boston Harbor. At age 12, he leaves the soap kettle to be apprenticed to his older brother James, a printer and stern taskmaster, bookseller, and publisher of the newspaper, the New England Courant. The sharp tang of ink excites Ben. For this very press, he sets type, reads proof, works the press, quickly mastering the skills of the printer's trade. In this attic room, he reads half the night away, hungrily going through a tremendous number of books on every imaginable subject. Soon he begins to write exceedingly well, modeling himself after the Spectator and other British periodicals. He is only 16 when he uses the fictitious name of Silence Dogood to pen a series of witty, biting essays for the Courant which become the talk of Boston. His brother James, feeling he's been deceived, is more harsh than ever. Ben, rebelling against this continuous abuse, sells his precious books for passage money on a ship going south. He is 17, short of funds, but long on courage and skill. It is the fall of 1723. Young Ben, weary and hungry, with a single Dutch dollar, finally arrives in Philadelphia, the largest town in the British colonies. He goes to work at Keimer's printing house, and his talent and great industry are recognized immediately. Silver soon jingles in his pockets, and he finds Philadelphia alive with exciting activity, new friends, pretty girls, many stimulating books to study at night. Only a year later, he's off to faraway London to buy printing equipment to set up his own shop, lured by the promise of all the government printing work for the province of Pennsylvania. But the expected funds on loan from the governor are not supplied, and Ben finds himself stranded in a strange city. But not for long, for London is a printing center, and Ben quickly finds employment at 2 large printing establishments. This is the press on which he perfected his craft. He thrives intellectually for more than a year and a half in the teeming, colorful British capital. Back in Philadelphia in the next quarter century, his publishing and printing activities soon begin to affect all the colonies. It's the first of his many fascinating careers. From his own printing shop and bookstore comes the Pennsylvania Gazette, issued twice a week, full of news and droll comment, most of it from Franklin's own facile pen. Hitting major colonial problems, the Gazette flourishes and becomes perhaps the most influential journal in America. Encouraging him is his young wife, Deborah, whom he marries when he's 24. Lights burn late at night, 7 days a week, as Ben also publishes books, pamphlets, and becomes the official printer for Pennsylvania. Largely through Franklin's hard efforts, Pennsylvania decides to issue paper money, a step that effectively aids the growing trade of the province. And to print this money, only Ben can contrive the necessary copperplate press, the first in America. International fame is brought by his press when Poor Richard's Almanac is published in 1732. Full of wit and wisdom, teaching industry and thrift, the almanac sells 10,000 copies a year. Its fictitious, amusing, henpecked author, Richard Saunders, is loved throughout America. Eventually, it is translated into 12 languages. The Pennsylvania Gazette and the Almanac are highly profitable. But more than that, they influence people, all of colonial life. And that's what Ben Franklin really cares about. Knowing that it's an exchange of ideas that makes men progress, Ben, at age 21, meets at a tavern with a dozen friends to organize the Junto, a debating society in philosophy and politics. It gathers once a week for many years, eventually leading to Franklin's proposal for the formation of the American Philosophical Society to promote the sciences. Elected its first president, he remains an ardent member all his life. The permanent home of this organization is headquartered at Philosophical Hall in Philadelphia to this very day. Members of the Junto individually cannot afford to buy all the books they crave. So Ben comes up with a plan for a subscription library, the Library Company of Philadelphia, the first of its kind in the world. Philadelphians enthusiastically purchase shares and pay small annual dues. Ben and his friends donate volumes and also begin to buy them. This is one of the actual book orders to England. From the beginning, the Library Company is a great success and grows rapidly. One of Franklin's great cultural contributions to America, the Library Company, is used as a model by other subscription libraries which spring up throughout the colonies. Troubled by increasing fires, Franklin, in 1736, organizes the Union Fire Company to put real method into haphazard volunteer firefighting. It starts with 50 men and leather buckets, but more equipment soon follows. This company becomes the model for a network of fire brigades which makes Philadelphia the best protected city in the colonies. Ben Franklin takes the next natural step to fire insurance. He suggests formation of the Philadelphia Contributorship for the insurance of homes from loss by fire, the oldest mutual fire insurance company in America, and the basis for the tremendously varied insurance industries of today. Clasped hand fire marks are used to indicate insured homes and buildings. He petitions the Pennsylvania Assembly for a charter and funds to build a hospital, for he is deeply concerned that Philadelphia, a city of 20,000, is neglecting its sick and mentally ill. He drafts the inscription for the cornerstone, and after tremendous work to raise the remaining funds publicly, the Pennsylvania Hospital opens, the first charity hospital in the colonies. Ben is personally active in hospital affairs, evidenced by page after page in his own handwriting of minutes of the meetings of the Board of Managers. In this way, he makes a real and lasting contribution to the arts of healing, for his account of hospital methods in Philadelphia is used as a guide in other major cities of British America. Scholarly Franklin dreams of a school of higher learning for Pennsylvania. He writes forcefully and persuasively about the need for an Academy of Philadelphia, and he and 24 other public-spirited citizens eventually raise the funds. The Academy finally opens in 1751, with Franklin as the first president of its board of trustees. The old Academy bell summons students to classes for many years of growth and development that lead eventually to the famed University of Pennsylvania of today. But business and civic affairs are not enough. The State House and public life claim Franklin at the age of 30, when he is appointed clerk, in effect the secretary, of the General Assembly of Pennsylvania, serving 14 years. Its bell, today the revered Liberty Bell, rings out to announce meetings of the provincial legislature. In 1751, he moves up, joining the Assembly as the elected representative for the city of Philadelphia. Re-elected 10 times, he takes a leading part in relationships among the 13 colonies and in matters of defense. Franklin suggests underwater chain barriers across the Delaware River to prevent French privateers from sacking and burning unprotected Philadelphia during the French and Indian Wars. He demands cannon on the river shores and directs the formation of a Pennsylvania volunteer militia that eventually numbers in the thousands. In 1755, he meets at the headquarters in Fredericktown with General Braddock, commander of all British forces in America, to work on transportation and supply and communication lines for England's expedition against the French at Fort Duquesne. Ben does the impossible. He recruits 150 Conestoga wagons from the barns of farmers for Braddock's ill-fated campaign to the west. When Indians plunder and burn the exposed Pennsylvania border, Franklin is a member of several difficult expeditions on horseback through remote country to negotiate treaties with the red men at Carlisle and Albany to try to get Indian allies against the attacking French in the Ohio Valley. Middle-aged Ben commands militia troops traveling through wilderness in all types of weather to build fortifications for the protection of Pennsylvania. Yet, despite all of his varied activities, Ben Franklin is really only at the beginning of his many great careers. Improved communications and understanding in the 13 colonies on the eve of the Revolution was one of the vital factors in winning America's independence. Benjamin Franklin's highly successful work on postal systems played a key role in promoting this intercolonial relationship. Until he is appointed by this paper as the King's Deputy Postmaster General for the colonies in 1753, mails are extremely slow, uncertain, and irregular. Ben immediately sets out on a series of long journeys by horseback and carriage to check routes and plan new post roads. As he travels, He is constantly aware that promoting postal programs is essential for the unification of the colonies. Armed with the forms and methods he has developed, Ben meets at local post offices from North Carolina to Massachusetts to improve accounting systems, solve problems, and establish rates. His invention, the odometer, fastened to the axle of his carriage, measures miles en routes as Ben continues to travel to make all the mail organization rapid and efficient. The new, reliable postal system grows, and for the first time shows a profit. By increasing and improving communications, Ben helps draw the colonies together, then pleads in America's first newspaper cartoon for the colonies to join or die in a union for defense and mutual understanding under the Crown. After independence, Ben becomes Postmaster General for the United States. There is little understanding of electricity until Franklin's probing experiments and observations reach the scientific world. With vacuum tubes, friction discs, glass jars, and his own electrostatic generating machines, the canny Philadelphian proves the concept of electricity as a current, its positive and negative properties, and deduces that matter consists of mobile electrically charged particles. An electrical storage battery, the world's first, is his next brilliant concept. And then comes the famous experiment to prove an amazing new idea, that lightning and electricity are one and the same. If this is true, he reasons that electricity from a black storm cloud will flow down from the metal on a high-flying kite through a wet string of hemp to a key. Thunder rumbles and lightning flashes as this stoutish man of 46 stands in a stable this sultry summer afternoon in 1752. As Ben watches the key, suddenly electric fire sparks, charging the glass jar at his feet. This leads to his inventing the pointed metal lightning rod to protect homes, an idea that is greeted enthusiastically in the colonies and in Europe. His writings on electricity, in which he builds a new vocabulary for the young science, are translated into several languages, and he is recognized as America's leading scientist. He lays the foundation for modern weather reporting when he discovers that most storms travel from southwest to northeast. He is the first to study the movement of the Gulf Stream across the Atlantic, charting its course, temperature, speed, and depth. In hydrodynamics, he proves that deeper canals will speed water transportation. His inquiring mind probes into the ventilation of mines, evaporation, watertight compartments for safer ships, the causes of lead poisoning, and other subjects. Impatient with inefficient conventional fireplaces that lose most of their heat up the chimney, Ben invents the cast iron Pennsylvania fireplace known as the Franklin stove, still used today in some farmhouses. It burns less than half the fuel and sends heated fresh air through vents to warm entire rooms evenly and economically. His report on the discovery spreads through the colonies and Europe and has beneficial effects on public health. His other inventions include bifocal eyeglasses, the combination of chair and table, a chair that turns into a stepladder, a portable writing desk, a mechanical arm to reach books on high shelves. He designs a ventilated four-side street lamp and gives his inventions freely to all the world. Franklin is back in England in 1757 to spend 18 years as the unofficial ambassador of the colonies. He comes to London because the proprietors of Pennsylvania, the Penn family, refused to allow their millions of acres to be taxed to help support the expenses of the province. Angered, the Pennsylvania Assembly sends Franklin to plead with the Penns at their London headquarters. Rebuffed coldly, Franklin is forced to take his case to the king's ministers, often at private homes, unofficially. Although Franklin eventually wins a partial victory, his next step is to ask British officials to change Pennsylvania from a proprietorship to a crown colony. But the dull king and his money-hungry ministers are indifferent to Pennsylvania's problems and are only concerned with financing Britain's wars with colonial taxes. The result is the Stamp Act, placing a levy on all legal documents and newspapers. Franklin sets to work behind the scenes to force repeal of the act. Going to Parliament almost daily, he predicts that the English will lose their lucrative sales markets in America. As usual, he is absolutely right. An alarmed House of Commons quizzes him for half a day, and Franklin's brilliant presentation is credited throughout England as a strong force in the cancellation of the Stamp Act. But the victory is short-lived, for the Townshend Acts are put into effect to tax tea and all other imports to America. Echoing the impassioned colonial charge that taxation without representation is tyranny, Franklin is again in the thick of the difficult negotiations. He is appointed colonial representative for Massachusetts, Georgia, and New Jersey. Oxford University confers on him the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws. He writes continually to the press and magazines, urging that the colonies be represented in Parliament. When his wife Deborah dies back in Philadelphia, he trudges London at night, mourning her passing, further saddened by the fact that although he has been pleading for moderation on both sides, he is being accused by the British of being too American and by the colonists of being too British. The Privy Council, unable to bribe Franklin and powerless to silence him, publicly abuses him. It is the last straw. Franklin finally realizes that he must leave England. With the king sending troops to Boston, there is no way to prevent the break with the crown. He sails for home in 1775 to help the colonies find the road to independence. So here on July 1st, 1776, at the State House in Philadelphia, sits 70-year-old Dr. Franklin, remembering the tremendously varied events of the long years past, but now ready to make the final arguments to assure that the resolution for freedom, for separation from England, is passed and the Declaration of Independence signed. For without these, the war cannot be won. The Second Continental Congress has appointed Franklin to 10 important committees, among which is one to draft the Declaration, along with 4 other delegates, including rapier-tongued John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who is to do the major writing. With Franklin's strong support, the resolution is finally adopted. And after many changes and deletions to accommodate the various colonies, the Declaration is signed. We must be unanimous. We must all hang together, says Congressional President Hancock as he inscribes his name boldly. To which allegedly Franklin replies with bitter humor, "We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately." The inexperienced Continental Army will find the British the strongest enemy in the world, Franklin realizes. What's to be done? Perhaps the solution for the young nation is in getting help from France. And no one can play the devious game of European politics and international diplomacy better than the wise old fox from Philadelphia. After offering his personal fortune to Congress as a loan, Franklin arrives in France already a celebrity, for Poor Richard's wisdom and scientific achievements have long preceded him. Almost 9 years he spends headquartered at a lovely chateau just outside Paris. In its gardens he meets informally with French and American representatives and ponders the complex problems of persuading France to provide large amounts of desperately needed funds and supplies, without committing itself in a formal alliance with a small nation that appears to be losing a war. Charming the French with his wit and confidence, he works tremendously hard to raise 43 million francs in loans and gifts to save the revolution from bankruptcy. Idolized at Versailles by the wigged and powdered courtiers and ladies of French society, Franklin eventually makes his successful plea directly to the King and Queen. Despite the intrigues of British spies and his failing health, he acts effectively in all ways as the American ambassador. He obtains a ship, the Bonhomme Richard, the name which the French called him in affectionate tribute. On it, decks awash and rigging shot away, John Paul Jones makes naval history with his dramatic declaration, I have only just begun to fight. Franklin hopes that the formal French alliance is his final task. But Congress in Annapolis, Maryland, asks him to stay on after the military victory for the long, difficult negotiations of a peace treaty with England. He arranges commercial agreements with European nations, and then, finally, in 1785, at 79, full of honors, he sails home, one man having captured an entire nation. Back in America, he is elected to the presidency of Pennsylvania, taking the oath of office at the State House and serving 3 terms. He is among the statesmen who realize that the old Articles of Confederation of the 1770s are no longer adequate for a growing new country with tremendous problems. In 1787, at age 81, he is one of the leaders of the convention during 5 months of secret session to create a constitution. The convention is on the verge of failure over severe disagreements between the small and large states over representation in Congress. Although personally preferring a single legislative chamber, Franklin offers the great compromise upon which the United States operates today, of a Senate with equal representation for each state and a House of Representatives with representation according to the population. The Constitution is signed by Franklin and the other delegates. Old Ben finally retires to read for hours in the largest and finest private library in America. He writes a will, leaving substantial grants for education. His last public act is to write a stinging attack on slavery, pleading with Congress to abolish this injustice to mankind. Despite great pain, he awaits death with courage and composure. The end comes peacefully for the 84-year-old sage of Philadelphia in April 1790. Muffled bells toll as the processional of 20,000 people accompanies poor Richard to Christ Church graveyard, where he is laid to rest beside his wife. All America, all the world, knows that a rare old volume has gone out of print. A unique combination of talents brought this self-taught genius from printer's apprentice to citizen of the world, from the candlemaker's shop to the colorful court of Versailles. Because he was incredibly curious, with a passion for knowledge, he had in one lifetime many careers: an outstanding printer, journalist, author, publisher, educator, scientist, inventor, scholar, philanthropist, philosopher, patriot, diplomat, and statesman. He was the only man to sign the 4 major documents that governed the birth of our nation: the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the French Alliance, and the Treaty of Peace with England. Because our paintings of him are mostly of his advanced years, some tend to think of him only as a spindly-legged old gentleman endlessly weaving epigrams about thrift. He was, in fact, a robust, vital, sophisticated man of strength and courage. And in concert with his towering intellect, he had a devastating, earthy wit and humor. The inventor who devised the Franklin stove loved a well-turned angle as well as a well-turned phrase. For you, his legacy of the future, he gave up his greatest passion, science, to bring to the colonies and the struggling young republic a sense of unity that was to make possible the United States of America.